The northern forests of British Columbia are vast, a labyrinth of mist, pine, and silence. On August 2nd, 1989, that silence swallowed a family whole. Ronnie Jack, his wife Doreen, and their two sons, Russell and Ryan, were last seen leaving their modest home on Strathcona Avenue in Prince George. They stepped into a dark pickup truck driven by an unknown man, heading toward a logging camp that, as far as anyone knows, never existed. The road they took is a ghostly ribbon through dense wilderness, a place where isolation itself feels alive. There were no goodbyes, no witnesses beyond that final sighting, just the sound of an engine fading into the night, and then nothing. If you love true unsolved mysteries, like and follow for more. Every detail could help someone remember what really happened in 1989. To understand their disappearance, we must begin with the ordinary moments that came before it. Ronnie Jack, 26, was a hard-working man struggling to provide for his family. The logging industry around Prince George offered unstable work, and he had recently injured his back, leaving the Jacks in a tight financial spot. On the evening of August 1st, he visited the First Liter pub, looking for a drink, and perhaps a chance to turn things around. That's when a stranger approached him, a tall Caucasian man with reddish-brown hair, a full beard, and a calm, persuasive tone. The man claimed he could offer Ronnie and his wife jobs at a remote camp near Klukul's Lake, with housing and even childcare for their boys. To a young couple trying to rebuild, the offer must have sounded like salvation. But within 24 hours, that offer would become the last known thread connecting the Jack family to the world of the living. That night back at home, Ronnie told Doreen about the stranger and the promise of steady work. Neighbors would later recall that the couple seemed hopeful, relieved even. Doreen, 26, was described as soft-spoken and devoted to her boys, always careful about strangers. Yet something in Ronnie's tone, perhaps the quiet confidence of a man who finally saw a way out, convinced her to take the chance. Before going to bed, Ronnie made a phone call to his parents in the nearby town of Burns Lake. He said that a man had offered him a job at a logging camp and that he and his family would leave in the morning. "We'll be gone about 10 days, he said, promising to call again once they got settled. That call would be the last anyone ever heard from him. On the other end of the line, his mother remembered his voice. Calm, certain, and tired, not knowing those words would echo through decades of unanswered questions. The next morning, August 2nd, dawned grey and cool. The Jacks packed lightly, just enough clothing for a few days, a few toys for the boys. Witnesses saw the family at their home on Strathcona Avenue shortly before they left. Around 11 p.m. that night, neighbors reported seeing them climbing into a dark-colored pickup truck parked outside, possibly a four-wheel drive, perhaps blue or black, with a man matching the stranger's description at the wheel. No one caught the license plate. The vehicle turned west, disappearing down the road toward Highway 16, a route later infamous as the Highway of Tears. It was the last trace of the Jack family. No witnesses came forward from any camp. No bank activity followed, no calls, no bodies. Just the whisper of tires on asphalt and a family fading into the wilderness. Days passed quietly at first. For those who knew the Jacks, it wasn't unusual for them to be away a while. Logging camps could be remote, communications unreliable. But when 10 days turned into 2 weeks, unease began to take hold. Ronnie's parents waited by the phone, replaying his last words, expecting another call that never came. Doreen's sister, Marlene, began making inquiries, calling around, asking if anyone had heard from them. Nothing. The family's modest house on Strathcona Avenue remained untouched, dishes still on the counter, children's clothes folded neatly in drawers. When the Royal Canadian Mounted Police were finally contacted on August 25, 1989, an official missing persons report was filed, 23 days after the family vanished. That delay, investigators would later admit, was a costly one. In the wilderness of northern British Columbia, 3 weeks is long enough for 1,000 clues to be swallowed whole. Police began retracing the family's final hours, interviewing patrons from the First Liter pub and canvassing the surrounding neighborhoods. Multiple witnesses confirmed seeing Ronnie with the tall, bearded man who had promised him work. He was described as friendly, confident and well-spoken, the kind of man who seemed trustworthy enough to lure a desperate father. Investigators searched for any nearby logging operations that matched his story, but no company in the region reported hiring anyone named Jack. There was no camp offering family accommodations, no job postings that fit the description. The man's identity evaporated as easily as his words. RCMP distributed composite sketches and followed hundreds of tips, yet every lead ended in a dead end. It was as if the stranger and the Jacks had been erased from the map. For 7 long years, the case lay dormant, a growing scar on the heart of Prince George. The Jack family's disappearance had become a quiet legend, a story locals mentioned in hushed tones when the northern fog rolled in. Then, in 1996, the phone rang inside the Vanderhoof RCMP detachment. The call lasted only 10 seconds. The voice, described as male and agitated, said, "The Jack family are buried in the south end of the ranch." Then, a click. The line went dead. Officers froze, the silence on the tape both chilling and deafening. They traced the call as best they could, but it led nowhere. The origin was never confirmed. What made the message more haunting was its specificity. The south end of the ranch, a phrase suggesting the caller knew something real, something hidden. For investigators, it was both a spark of hope and a dagger of uncertainty. In the weeks that followed, police released the recorded call to the public, hoping someone would recognize the voice. Experts conducted voice analysis, and ranch owners in the surrounding areas were questioned. Teams scoured rural properties, including several near the Saiku's First Nation, where the terrain is wild and layered with history. Yet again, nothing surfaced. No graves, no bones, no evidence. But to many who heard the recording, something about the man's tone, hurried, almost fearful, suggested that he might have been close to the truth. The call became a ghost within the investigation. Proof that someone, somewhere, knew what happened to the Jacks, but either couldn't or wouldn't come forward. Years passed, and the sound of that trembling voice faded into the static of time, another haunting echo in a case already drowning in silence. As the years bled into decades, the mystery refused to fade. Detectives came and went, each reopening the file, each leaving with more questions than answers. The RCMP interviewed hundreds of people across northern British Columbia, from loggers and ranchers to transient workers who drifted between camps. Leads stretched thinly across the province. Sightings that led nowhere, rumors of isolated cabins, whispers of men who fit the description of the stranger. None proved verifiable. The Jack case became one of the longest-running missing person investigations in Canada, yet it yielded no remains, no vehicle, no trace. Investigators speculated that the man who offered the job might have been a drifter familiar with back roads and campsites, someone capable of vanishing into the wilderness as easily as he had appeared. To some, it felt as though the forest itself had claimed the family, the endless expanse of green swallowing them whole. In 2019, hope flickered again. Acting on renewed tips and modern technology, RCMP investigators, with cooperation from the Saiku's First Nation, brought in ground-penetrating radar to examine properties south of Vanderhoof. The area matched in part the cryptic clue from the 1996 call, the south end of the ranch. Teams combed through thick brush and muddy fields, guided by cadaver dogs and radar imaging, capable of detecting soil disturbances. The operation lasted several days, drawing quiet attention from media and local residents. But once more, the forest yielded no secrets, no human remains, no evidence of burial, no sign that the Jacks had ever been there. Yet for Marlene Jack, Doreen's sister, and the few remaining relatives, the search was not in vain. "Even if we find nothing," she told reporters, "we remind the world that they're still missing. That's something." Her voice carried both defiance and exhaustion, the tone of someone who refuses to let time bury the truth. By the mid-2000s, investigators had compiled a psychological portrait of the unknown man, the so-called stranger from the pub. Witnesses remembered him as a man in his 30s or 40s, Caucasian, standing well over 6 feet tall with reddish-brown hair and a short beard. He spoke with quiet confidence, possibly a local accent, and seemed familiar with logging life. Some described him as the kind of man you'd trust. That detail, his apparent harmlessness, was what haunted detectives most. To lure an entire family, including 2 young children, required a sense of credibility and calm. Was he a recruiter, a contractor, or something far darker? Composite sketches were circulated, yet no confirmed match ever surfaced. Decades later, some officers privately speculated that he might have been a man already known to police, someone who operated on the margins of remote labor camps, preying on those desperate for work. But without physical evidence, speculation remained all they had. Among the public, theories multiplied. Some believed the Jacks met with an accident en route to the alleged camp, that their truck veered off a logging road, hidden beneath decades of overgrowth. Others suspected abduction or murder, suggesting the stranger's job offer had been a trap. There were whispers of human trafficking, of debts owed, of systemic failure to protect indigenous families like the Jacks. Online forums and documentaries later linked the case to the Highway of Tears, a 720-kilometer stretch of Highway 16 where dozens of indigenous women and families had vanished since the 1970s. While the RCMP stopped short of confirming any connection, the parallels were impossible to ignore. The geography, the ethnicity, the silence. The Jack family's disappearance became part of a grim pattern, one that revealed not just a mystery, but a wound carved deep into the land itself. For the Jack family's relatives, the search never truly ended. It simply transformed into endurance. Doreen's sister, Marlene Jack, became the voice of persistence, refusing to let the case be forgotten. Over the years, she contacted journalists, pressed the RCMP for updates, and organized awareness events in Prince George. Each year, she would speak their names aloud. Ronnie, Doreen, Russell, Ryan, a ritual meant to fight against time's erasure. In interviews, Marlene's grief carried a raw clarity. "We just want to bring them home," she said in one broadcast, "even if it's just their bones." Online, a Missing Jack Family Facebook group became a digital memorial, collecting theories, maps, and memories. What began as a family tragedy slowly grew into a symbol of how indigenous families too often vanish into the wilderness and how justice seems to lose its way among the trees. The community of Prince George, long haunted by loss, carried the story like a ghost that refused to rest. Each new generation heard it, the family that left in a pickup and never came back. Some locals claimed they remembered the stranger's face. Others swore they saw a similar truck on the road that night. Campfire stories blurred into testimonies, but one fact remained: the forest keeps its secrets. Murals were painted, memorial walks were held, and the Jack name became both a warning and a plea. Police re-interviewed witnesses over the years, hoping fading memories might reveal something overlooked. But time, that cruel accomplice, kept pulling the truth further away. The silence surrounding the Jacks was not just the silence of absence. It was the silence of a system that had failed to protect them, and a land that seemed to conspire with forgetting. In recent years, the disappearance of the Jack family has resurfaced through documentaries, podcasts, and social media campaigns. True crime researchers and indigenous advocates have reignited public pressure, urging the RCMP to re-examine the case with modern forensic tools. Digital archives now preserve every detail, The pub encounter, the phone call, the composite sketch, as if rebuilding a map of vanished time. The Canada Unsolved Initiative and local independent investigators have brought renewed visibility, drawing attention to inconsistencies and missed opportunities from the early investigation. DNA analysis, satellite imagery, and cold case units have been discussed, yet progress remains painfully slow. The RCMP maintains that the case is still active and ongoing, but to the families, that phrase has come to sound hollow, a bureaucratic heartbeat echoing through the emptiness. Every new mention of the Jacks' names brings both hope and exhaustion. Hope that someone, somewhere, still cares, and exhaustion that after 36 years, they are still missing. In 2021, the story found new audiences when investigative journalists revisited it as part of a broader series on the Highway of Tears. The eerie similarities between cases reignited an old question. Was the Jack family's disappearance an isolated event, or part of something larger? A pattern of predation and neglect spanning decades. Interviews with surviving relatives revealed enduring frustration at how quickly early leads had gone cold, and how little media attention the case received in comparison to others. For many Indigenous Canadians, the Jack story symbolizes more than a single tragedy. It stands as a mirror reflecting systemic invisibility. How some lives vanish not just into forests, but into silence. The image of that pickup truck, headlights piercing the night, has become emblematic of both danger and loss. A moving metaphor for every missing person who disappeared into the wilds of British Columbia, leaving behind only questions and echoes. Even after decades of investigation, the central questions remain suspended in shadow. Who was the man in the pickup truck? How did he know the Jacks were vulnerable, looking for work, desperate enough to trust a stranger? And what became of them once they left Prince George? Investigators have considered every possible route. Highway 16 toward Vanderhoof, the dirt roads branching to Klukul's Lake, and the labyrinthine network of Forest Service roads beyond. None revealed a single clue. The truck was never found, nor were any belongings, bones, or tire tracks conclusively tied to the family. The absence of physical evidence became, paradoxically, the case's most chilling feature. It suggested either a meticulously planned disappearance or a landscape vast enough to erase 4 lives without a trace. Each theory leads back to the same cold truth. Someone, somewhere, knows what happened and has managed to stay silent for more than 3 decades. As time passed, local legends grew around the case, blurring fact and folklore. Some spoke of a logging camp that once existed briefly near Klukul's Lake, unregistered, short-lived, forgotten after a fire. Others whispered of back roads that led to private land where transient workers lived off the grid. Hunters have claimed to see abandoned trucks deep in the bush, rusting away, their plates long removed. None of it has ever been proven, but every rumor keeps the story alive. For the people of Prince George, the forest holds a dual identity, a source of life and labor, and a graveyard of secrets. The Jack family became part of that haunting, a reminder that even in modern Canada, entire families can disappear without a sound. The case endures not just as an unsolved mystery, but as a wound that refuses to close, pulsing quietly beneath the soil and snow of the northern wilderness. Over the years, investigators and independent researchers have pieced together several possible scenarios, each darker and more unsettling than the last. The first, and perhaps most pragmatic, is the accidental death theory, that the family accepted the ride, drove along one of the unpaved forestry roads west of Prince George, and suffered a fatal crash. In the wilds of British Columbia, vehicles can disappear beneath dense growth or sink silently into deep water. Entire wrecks have been found decades later, perfectly preserved in lakes hidden by moss and time. Yet no vehicle matching the description has ever been discovered, despite extensive aerial and ground searches. The second theory, the one that keeps investigators awake at night, is that the job offer was never real, that it was bait. Someone deliberately lured the Jacks into isolation, intending harm, whether for robbery, exploitation, or something far worse. The motive remains as elusive as the man himself. A third possibility emerged from whispers around nearby logging communities, that the stranger may have been connected to an unregistered or illegal camp where workers were paid cash and kept off the books. These temporary camps often vanished overnight, leaving no record. If the Jacks arrived at such a place, they could have met with violence or an accident covered up by others who feared prosecution. Still, without a trace of their belongings or remains, the scenario remains speculation. To some, it feels less like an investigation and more like an unfinished ghost story, a narrative that keeps folding in on itself. Every retelling only deepens the shadows. It's this ambiguity that makes the Jack disappearance so haunting. There is no closure, no evidence, only a vanishing so complete that even the land refuses to give up its memory. The disappearance of the Jack family transcends a police file. It has become a kind of northern folklore, a story whispered whenever mist rolls through the spruce and cedar forests. People say the woods remember what humans forget. The trees that lined Highway 16 the night the Jacks vanished are still there, tall and indifferent, standing guard over secrets they will never share. For those who drive that road after dark, headlights cutting through the fog, the thought is inescapable. 4 souls disappeared here, and the land never spoke again. The tragedy holds a strange duality. It is both deeply personal and hauntingly symbolic. It speaks not only to one family's fate, but to the quiet erasure that has touched countless Indigenous families across Canada. The Jack story is the echo of all those who vanished without justice, a silence that hums beneath the roar of every passing truck. To this day, no graves have been found, no confessions made. The RCMP case file remains open, its pages worn from years of handling, its leads mostly exhausted. Yet when Marlene Jack appears at public events, her face weathered by time, her voice steady, people still listen. She has said she dreams of her sister sometimes, standing at the edge of the forest, holding her children's hands. In the dream, they do not speak. They simply look back as if waiting to be found. It is that vision, fragile and unresolved, that keeps Marlene searching. For her, and for many who followed the case, the hope is no longer about uncovering every detail. It's about acknowledgement, about ensuring the family's names are never buried by indifference. The truth may remain hidden, but remembrance, at least, can still survive. If you visit Prince George today, the house where the Jacks once lived still stands, weathered, quiet, unremarkable. Neighbors come and go, unaware of the ghost story embedded in its walls. The address, 2116 Strathcona Avenue, is not marked by plaques or flowers, only the slow decay of time. Yet for those who know, that small home feels like the starting point of an unsolved riddle. How can an entire family vanish between one heartbeat and the next? Standing outside, you can almost imagine the sound of children laughing from a window, the echo of an engine idling outside, the faint smell of pine carried on the wind. Everything ordinary, everything fragile. It is in that ordinariness that the horror truly lives. The realization that disappearance often begins in moments that seem safe. Over the decades, the Jack family's story has become a symbol, not just of tragedy, but of the indifference that allows tragedies to persist. Investigators changed, governments changed, even the technology evolved, but the outcome remained the same. 4 names, still missing. Their case sits alongside hundreds of others in the archives of the Highway of Tears, each one representing a life swallowed by distance, neglect, and silence. For many Canadians, the Jacks are no longer just a mystery. They are a reminder that disappearance is not only a physical act, but a societal one. the slow fading of people from memory when systems fail to see them. Their story is a plea to look closer, to remember longer, and to speak for those who cannot. At night, the forests west of Prince George hum with the same wind that carried the Jacks away. Truck headlights still streak through the fog, and the highway's vast loneliness remains unchanged. Somewhere out there, in the labyrinth of rivers, dirt roads, and shadowed clearings, the truth waits, patient and silent. Maybe it's buried beneath a fallen cedar, or hidden in the memories of a man who never came forward. Or perhaps it has become part of the land itself, absorbed by the soil and roots of the northern wilderness. The silence of the case feels alive, not empty, but watchful, as if the forest itself guards the answer. And so, more than 3 decades later, the story of Ronnie, Doreen, Russell, and Ryan Jack remains one of Canada's most haunting unsolved mysteries. Their faces, once printed on faded missing posters, now live on through online archives and the hearts of those who refuse to forget. The wilderness that took them has no memory, but we do. Somewhere the truth still lingers, not erased, merely waiting for the right question, the right witness, the right moment. Until then, their story drifts through the northern wind like a whisper. We were here. If stories like this move you, share it. Someone, somewhere might hold the missing piece.